At Education Commission of the States,
we believe in the power of learning from experience.
Every day,
we provide education leaders
with unbiased information
and opportunities for collaboration.
And we do this
because we know
that inform policymakers
create better education policy.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to stage a President of Education Commission of the States, Jeremy Anderson.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2017 National Forum on Education Policy. I love watching that video because for all of you, it gives you a glimpse into not only the people who serve on your education policy team, our staff, but also on why we do what we do. We truly believe in the power of learning from experience. And every day we do provide you with all sorts of unbiased information and opportunities like this for collaboration. And we do it because we know that the best education policy doesn't just come from one bill, it comes from people in your positions learning from each other. When I think about the National Forum, I think about our history a lot. We were actually founded about 52 years ago when the very first Elementary and Secondary Education Act passed. It was a component of the Civil Rights Act, and governors, chief state school officers, legislators across the country were scared. It was the first time ever that the federal government had done anything on K-12 education policy. And honestly, what they wanted was an institution that could be built that could allow the states to learn from each other. They hadn't done that a lot previously. We've actually been around longer than the U.S. Department of Education has, just for historical take. And I always like to look back at a quote that was given at the very first National Forum that we had. Governor Terry Sanford, who was the governor of North Carolina and became our first president, said this at the first National Forum. We have it etched in glass in our office in Denver, Colorado. He said, "The commission must stir up trouble and make the body politic itch. It must be unafraid. It must be the blueprint of an architect. It must be responsive to all good ideas, and it must take the problems, assemble the best people, and seek the answers, whatever they may be." I think that quote really says a lot about why you're all here. It's not just the ocean view. It's because you want to make a difference. You want to help find better policy for better outcomes. We're excited about the attendance we have here because we have a large number of our commissioners with us here for these next 3 days. In most states, we are in statute, and we have over 350 commissioners for the Education Commission of the States. In most states, our 7 commissioners in the states are the governor, the chief state school officer, chair of Senate Ed, chair of House Ed, higher ed executive, sometimes some policy leaders, some early learning experts. And we're excited because we have all of those represented here for the next 3 days. But what I want to talk to you about to start off the National Forum is the dramatic change that we're seeing across the country. And I'm not talking about Congress, and I'm not talking about presidential races or anything in Washington. I'm talking about who are the education policymakers in the states. We're seeing dramatic changes, not historical changes, but dramatic changes that we haven't seen in a long while. And I want to talk specifically about a 2-year period that started this January of 2017 and will continue through 2018. So this includes people who got elected in the 2016 elections, came into office in January of this year. And many of you are thinking the 2018 election is so far away. Well, it's 16 months off from now. And we've seen some very big change, which has the impact on the kind of policies that you're able to consider. When we look at some of the state house races, in 2016, there were 86 partisan chamber elections, meaning the House or Senate in that state had almost everyone or most of their members up for election. There were some significant changes in which party had which chamber in different states, but the big change is that there's a lot of new people that got elected to the legislature recently. Not a historic number, but a very large number. This is really important for you to be thinking about because legislative bodies like this are the ones who are going to need to do the appropriations for any program you hope to implement. And more importantly, are the people who you want to have some longevity there so that they can actually allow your policies a chance to get implemented over a 4 or 5 year period so you can see if there's meaningful outcomes. When we look at chief state school officers, there's been some dramatic changes that have happened. Many of you think of your chief state school officer and probably assume they're appointed by your governor or they're appointed by your state board. Actually, about a third are appointed by the state board. Almost a third are elected in statewide races like Secretary of State or Attorney General. And then there's another that are appointed by their governor. There's 13 total states that have elections, and in the last 6 months, we have actually had 6 of those elections take place. 5 took place in 2016, 1 took place in April. And the reason I want you to look at this is of those 6 elections, only 2 incumbents were retained. So we have the chief state school officer in North Dakota who was retained for a 2nd term, and in April, the chief state school officer in Wisconsin was retained for a 3rd term. I was just talking with the Council of the Chief State School Officers today, and the average tenure in America right now for a chief state school officer is 2.5 years, 30 months. So enough time to move some major policy, but the question is, who are the other deputies or the next person coming into office who will be able to actually implement that policy? We do a lot of work with different state boards of ed. And again, many of you look at your state board of ed as an appointed body, but in 11 states, they're elected officials. And this is kind of an interesting look at where the political powers are. In 2016, 10 states held elections for their state board of ed positions. 46 total seats across the country were up. And 24 of those 46 had freshmen elected to the state board of ed. More than 50% turnover. I think it was Utah that had 8 on the ballot and got 8 brand new members. This is really important with your policies because your state board of ed is almost always one of the best entities to be the eyes and ears with your district leaders on whether your policies are actually fulfilling the goals you had with the problem you were trying to solve. But we see a lot of this happening with governors, and it's important because governors have the honor of having some of the biggest bully pulpits. In 2016, there were 12 gubernatorial races. There were 4 incumbents who were reelected. We were especially excited that Governor Steve Bullock of Montana was reelected. We don't get into races, we don't take sides, but he's our current chair, so that was really good that he got reelected in November. But there were 8 brand new governors elected in 2016, and that was the beginning of this 2-year period, and I want to show you what that's going to look like in the crystal ball that we have. So we know we had 8 new governors here. And we know that between today and November of 2018, there will be 36 additional governors' races. And of those 36, 16 of those governors are term limited. They can't run for re-election. We also know that here in 2017, we've already had 3 governors resign. The governor of Iowa and the governor of South Carolina resigned to take cabinet positions with President Trump's administration, and the governor of Alabama resigned for personal reasons. When we look at those numbers combined, though, we had 8 new governors elected last November, 3 that resigned and were already replaced, and 16 guaranteed new. In a 24-month period, at a minimum, we have 27 brand new governors in this country. And one of the biggest things that I see is in that purple circle. Those 27 new governors appoint 18 of the chief state school officers. So when you're thinking about the policies that we're going to discuss over the next 3 days, don't just think about getting your bill passed. Don't just think about having the policy put into rule and reg. Think about who is the team in your state, hopefully a bipartisan group, that's going to be there to actually implement and achieve the goal you had, which is better outcomes for the students. When we look at the map of the governors that are going to change, these are those 27 states where there will be changes in some capacity by November of 2018. And when we add on the other states that have governors' races, meaning the incumbent governor could run for re-election, although there's 3 states, or 2 at least, I know of Minnesota and Idaho, where the governors announced they won't be running for re-election. This is the map of change that's going to happen by November of 2018. And this is at a time when many of you are looking at totally redesigning your higher ed financial aid programs, looking at an Every Student Succeeds Act, considering major early learning programs. And so it's really important that you think about who is going to be in that role to help you succeed. We also see a lot of changes in education policy, and we think about that all the time, and there's a lot of change going on. But I like sometimes to look at numbers because they're actually kind of scary. When we look at early learning initiatives that legislatures introduced, Anybody have a guess on how many early learning bills were introduced from January until today in state legislatures across the country? Anybody? 300 is low. 1,000 is closer. There were 1,108 early learning bills introduced in the legislatures since January. Early learning bills don't have the highest success rate of passing. 10% of them became law, and we have 110 new early learning policies in the country already. That involves all-day K, early learning programs, teacher certification programs, quality control for early learning, but it's a major change in many of the states. When we look at the K-12 area, a lot of the discussion is all around the Every Student Succeeds Act. And when you look historically at the country, Congress has passed in the last 50 years somewhere between 5 to 7 major K-12 bills. I say 5 to 7 because it's really hard to figure out whether it was a bill or whether it was an appropriation, and so we stuck with 5 to 7 because Congress is difficult for us to understand. That being said, the Every Student Succeed Act is probably going to be here for a long time. 2 months ago, my wife and I were honored as our son graduated high school, and it was a little closer than it should have been, but he's going to college. But our son was one of 2 classes in America with a very interesting achievement. My son's class of 2017 and the graduating class of 2016 in America spent their entire kindergarten through senior and high school experience under one federal law. Whether you like No Child Left Behind or not, that is a history breaker for one class to spend 13 years in public school under one federal law with no revisions or changes. I sometimes use the analogy, 7 iPhones were delivered in that same period. The change of the Every Student Succeed Act to bring power to the states and allow states to make policies as necessary for what's best for their kids is impressive. But it's only going to be successful if you're thinking about who's on your state team that's going to be in that office the next 3 or 4 years to actually do the implementation and make it a reality. We're seeing a lot in higher ed, a lot more than we usually have. There aren't nearly as many bills introduced in higher ed, and I think that's because it's sometimes a little bit more complex dealing with the state universities. But this last year, in the last 6 months, there have been 336 bills introduced in the state legislatures that are directly higher ed related, and there's some really interesting ones there. Higher ed bills, when introduced, have a 30% chance of actually passing. 108 of them actually became law. And there's some states looking at some really interesting things around higher ed that are really focused on equity, and you wouldn't even think about it. There are now 28 states in America that have passed laws to guarantee that any child who has been in their foster care system has a tuition waiver to go to college at a state university if they graduate high school. There are a host of states that are looking at redesigning their financial aid program to make it a reality for the students we're actually serving, many of which are going for 5 or 6 years to college, and the knowledge that 1/3 of our students in America actually have a child. They're not a traditional student who's going to graduate by age 21. These changes in policies are important for you to consider because many times the higher ed, the K-12, and the early learning policies are being looked at in your states in a vacuum and not in how you can help kids through those transitions. So why does this all matter? It matters because of what we want to help you with as your education policy team. We're excited to serve you and to serve you in multiple ways through our research, our reports, our counsel, and our convenings. We do a lot of research and we do it all the time. We have a state policy database that has 45,000 different education policies in it. When I get a call from a governor's office, it usually starts off, our state's unique, we're special, there's no other state like us, and I agree with all that. But when I ask them what the problem is they're trying to solve, I can usually go to the state policy database and find 5 or 6 or 7 states that have not only tackled that issue, but some that have outcomes that could help that governor make a better policy choice. We continue to read every single one of your education policy bills, so we have that kind of information. But this year we've done some major upgrades in what we have available to you through our website and how you can utilize our services. This is one snapshot from our website, and it is a picture of laws that were passed that the focus of the bill was to help low-income students get better outcomes. The states in purple are those that passed a bill. This is what we have provided you for over a decade with our state policy database. It's been really hard for us to track every piece of legislation and analyze it, but we've been able to do all those bills that became law. But this year, we did some major upgrades with our IT and staffing. And we now, if you asked about low-income students and what bills are being considered in states, we can not only show you what passed, we can show you every single state that had a bill that was introduced. And while it may not have passed, it may have been because there wasn't the funding or the politics weren't right. It doesn't mean it was a bad policy that you couldn't learn from to do better in your state. We read the bills because we know it's important. We even have small parties when some omnibus appropriations pass in your state. And having worked over a decade in the State House, I can tell you there's some people who don't even read the omnibus bill before they vote. So we're excited that we actually read from the first page to the 1,000 page on every single omnibus bill. And we do that because it's what we love doing as your education policy team. But what's great about that is we have almost 50 states that read omnibus bills. And you're looking at me like those people are crazy and you've got to have terrible turnover with your staff. Well, we not only don't have turnout, but this year we were actually named one of the 50 best nonprofits to work at in America. And it's truly, thank you. And it's truly an honor about the staff that we have in Denver and in DC that are there to serve every single one of your needs, regardless of what you're looking for in the education policies. We do a host of reports that many of you utilize, some of which are going to be on your tables over the next 3 days, and many are going to be on the app that we have so that you can get the resources. But last year alone, we put together 52 brand new reports on everything across the P20 spectrum. And we did that based on what your requests were and what you were asking us to help on. We also did 6 50-state comparisons, and we'll continue to do those at as fast a rate as we can. We do a lot of counseling, not counseling as you would, but providing counsel to you with technical assistance. On any given week, I'm always watching the airlines to make sure there aren't any planes down or terrible storms, because I've got 5 to 7 staff in 5 or more states almost every single week. This year alone, we've already been in 29 states. I know we've been in a lot of those because when I landed Monday here, it was my 17th state I've been in since January. We do this because it's the best way that we can help to connect with you. Last year, we were in each of these states. If your state's not orange, don't get upset. It doesn't mean we didn't serve you. It means you didn't ask us to come to your state. And so let me know how we can help. We probably did in a host of other ways, though. But we do a lot of state relations trips where we come in to help connect some of your players across the many different jobs that you each have. We do testimony in many states about what's happening nationally, everything from school choice to school finance funding to state financial aid redesign. But what we do a lot more is technical assistance. We get called in by all of you to do a 2 or 3 day seminar for your staff to help bring their knowledge of the policies across the country up to a foundational level so that you can start to work on major policies. We also do a lot of presentations, whether it's with the National Governors Association, the National Conference of State Legislators, the Council of Chief State School Officers, the State Board of Ed Association. We present at many of their conferences to try to share the wealth of information we have with their members so that we can work together with them. But convenings are what we enjoy the most. And I'm excited to have all of you here for our national forum. This is our biggest meeting of the year, and we're excited because we have all of you here with us. We've got over 550 attendees. I think our final registration as of this morning was 590. And it includes a diverse group of education policymakers. We have governors. We have a large number of state legislators who are the chairs of their House education or of their Senate education. We also have a lot of higher ed executives, some who've been with us for a while at some ancillary meetings that we had. We've done a lot of work with state boards of ed. We actually had a group of executive directors of state boards of ed that have been meeting the last 2 days in advance of this. We have a lot of partners from business and industry who are here. We have a lot of school district leaders, and we also have a lot of teachers. And I'd love to ask for the 2017 Teachers of the Year to stand and be recognized because they are all here with us today. It's great that for the 12th year in a row, we've been able to bring all 51 of the Teachers of the Year here to our national forum. And I would urge you as policymakers to engage with them. The program that you're most fond of and most proud of that was supposed to eliminate problems with third grade reading may not have been implemented in their classroom the way you thought it was with your bill. Talk to them about how they can help you best understand what needs to be done to get better outcomes for the students, because it's a great opportunity to have them here with us. Over the next 3 days, we've got a host of opportunities to make a difference and to teach. I was raised by 2 teachers who taught me quickly that everybody learns differently. So we have 6 plenary sessions taking place. We have 5 ed talks. We have 21 breakout concurrent sessions that are across the board in the entire P20 spectrum. From arts and STEM to ESSA and school funding. From financial aid redesign to what happens if you're actually going to have a reverse transfer and help someone at a 4-year institution go back to a community college and get an associate's degree with very little work. These are important policies that you should be considering in your state, and in almost all of those cases, 1 or 2 or 50-some people have already pushed policies like that. We also have 11 roundtable discussions tomorrow where I would urge you to meet with us. We're in the side room where we're going to be having meals. These roundtable discussions are very relaxed, but they're with national experts from across the board. You've got an opportunity to sit at a large table with them and talk in depth about what they're seeing in the nation and how they might be able to help you in your state. And we've got 2 networking receptions. Everybody has a networking reception at their convenings. We have one with the ocean as our backdrop, free drinks and free food. So we urge all of you to be there. Our networking reception tonight is at 5 o'clock and tomorrow is at 5:30, and it's right out that window in the Windsor Gardens, so you're going to want to make sure that you're there. How we choose what we share with you over the next 3 days is not something we pull out of a hat. It's something that we actually look at with the metrics we follow, and it's what you've asked us the most about. We do a lot of state information requests. This is where a legislator or a chief calls me and says, I need help on this. And our amazing staff looks and says, we don't have a paper on that yet. So within 24 to 48 hours, we write a private memo back to you that says, here's the question you asked, here's the research on that question, here's what 7 other states have already implemented. Can we help connect you with any of those states so that you can learn more about the issue? We've done 384 of those already this year. Last year, we did 660 of them. We keep them private, but if it's a good enough memo, we actually take your name and state off it and put it on our website because we think many others will be able to utilize that. The 3 biggest issues we've had so far this year: finance, high school, and school choice. Finance is a big one, and it's across the board. Early learning, K-12 redesign with some lawsuits that are out. As I told some of the legislative staffers who had a meeting yesterday, I was laughing a little bit because they're the only group I know who can start off a conference having breakfast together, and I can overhear 2 different tables saying, yeah, we're under a court order. But it's a reality in many of your states, and it's a reality that's going to be really important for the discussion we have. We also do a lot looking at our website, and our website is like a giant search bar for you. You're crazy to not go to it and type your issue in and see what papers we've already done, what information requests are there for you, what does our state policy database say. But the 2 most asked for issues so far in 2017 are the Every Student Succeeds Act and school choice. So we're excited for a really dynamic agenda that's going to take you through the next 3 days and keep you in this ballroom and not out at that ocean, learning more about the wealth of information and policies across the country. On Friday, we're actually going to have an ed talk and a plenary on funding. Michael Griffith is one of the best in the nation, and we're excited because he's been working with our staff for almost 15 years now. We're going to have a long discussion about early, about K-12, and about some of the higher ed funding with a panel that he has. And again, that is the #1 requested issue you've had of us. Many people don't think of funding as a big issue, but it took me 6 years when I was working in a state house to understand our school finance formula. And if you think back to the amazing amount of change we're seeing in these offices, it's really important for people to become more knowledgeable in this. Tomorrow we have 2 major plenary sessions. One is on ESSA. We have Claudio Sanchez from National Public Radio here to talk about what he's seeing, and then for him to moderate a plenary panel. And then we have Sue Desmond-Hellman, the CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who's going to be interviewed by me on equity and what she sees from her perspective. And then she's going to lead a panel discussion on achievement gap. In the afternoon, we're going to have 2 different speakers around teaching and leading, and then we're going to have a panel discussion with Governor Steve Bullock from Montana and with Governor Phil Bryant from Mississippi on college and career readiness and the trends they're seeing from a governor's perspective. But today we're going to start off with one of the hottest subjects in the country, school choice. and one that we've heard a lot about from many of you, but there's a lot of disparity on what that means.